Hey everybody, mel0n here, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be checking out the brand new ZOWIE U2. Now ZOWIE has a very large catalog of mice in their lineup, most of them focusing on ergonomics or tactical shooter performance, but ZOWIE has done something very different here with the U2, where this is ZOWIE's first mouse that's optimized for non-tac shooters and more dynamic aiming situations that you'd find in like Fortnite or Overwatch 2. Now this is a big step for ZOWIE, and considering their reputation within the tac FPS community, having just being absolutely legendary, having them move over to more of a dynamic aiming focused mouse is a big leap for them, and it'll be very interesting to see if the U2 can actually perform as compared to a lot of the other mice available on the market. So I'm very interested to see what's going to happen with the U2 here. Now before we get into it, I did want to say a huge thank you to ZOWIE for sending U2 out for me to take a look at. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to be working with them again. I had a great time working with them when I reviewed the GSR2 a couple months ago, and I'm very honored to have a chance to work with them again for the U2 here. So a huge shout out to ZOWIE for sending this out for me to take a look at. I greatly appreciate it. As always, this review will be fully subtitled and will have timestamps available in the video description. All right, let's go ahead and get right into the unboxing. Now the U2 is currently up for pre-order on ZOWIE's site for 129 USD. It is currently only available in one size. There's only a medium size and there's only a black version. I'm not sure if ZOWIE is going to have other versions in the future with different colors, but as of right now, there's just the medium and the black coating. Now this is designed, as all ZOWIE mice are, to be completely plug and play. So this is completely driverless as you'd expect. This is designed for claw grip use with medium-ish size hands. It is a 60 gram weight mouse, so it is a little higher than some of the stuff we see on the market, but it is pretty light for a ZOWIE mouse, which is really cool to see. It is using a 3395 sensor. I don't know what version. I'm assuming it's the TDM T6QU, but I'll find out when I do my teardown. Now it is only using 1K hertz right now. ZOWIE has still not made the jump to 2 or 4K or 8K polling. They've been very slow to it. I think they're the only big brand that has not made the jump yet, which in all honesty, I'm kind of okay with, because realistically speaking, high polling rate doesn't really do a lot in my opinion for a lot of mice. So I'm completely fine with that, and I'd be very surprised if we don't see them upgrade it at some point in the near future. So that's completely fine. It does have a max DPI of 3200, so similar to what we saw in the Vaxi mice, again, the sensor is locked down to a specific DPI range. Again, completely fine to see. This does have both wired and wireless connectivity via the USB-C connector and the 2 included dongles inside the box, which we'll talk about in a minute. And it does have a 70-hour battery life over constant use. So I'm going to assume this probably has a 400 milliamp hour battery on the inside, but we'll find out what it is for the full review. So the packaging is actually a very thick box. This is probably one of the biggest boxes I've seen for a mouse in a very long time, but this will make sense a little bit once we see what's inside, because there's a lot in here. So first off, we have the U2 itself. Now again, this is a very odd sized mouse with a very different shape compared to a lot of the other things we've seen from ZOWIE, but it is a very interesting mouse. For it being 60 grams, it really doesn't feel like it's 60 grams, which is nice to see, but I'll talk about that more in a second. Now on the rest of the inside, we have just a quick little connector here, just telling you what to do with the mouse when you first get it. And then we have a plastic piece here. We'll take that off. And then we have an extra set of PTFE skates, which is really nice to see. Again, the skates are a very weird design from what I've seen with other mice, but that's okay. We'll see how they perform over testing. We have a user manual. This is probably one of the thickest user manuals I think I've ever seen for a mouse. Oh, it has full guides and everything. Okay, this is actually really nice to see. A lot of mice don't come with like proper in-paper documentation, and this is very in-depth, and it tells you how to do literally everything. So this is really nice to see, because again, this is a driverless plug-and-play mouse. So everything you do is going to be controlled by these buttons on the bottom, and they can be kind of confusing to learn at first. So having a handy on-paper guide just in the box is really nice to see. We have a warranty card registry here, and then we have, what is this? This is a bunch of regulatory statements. And then we have, now there's even more in this box, if you can believe it or not. So next up, we have the charging station. Now this acts as both a charging station and a wireless receiver for the ZOWIE mice, which is really cool. Their newer mice have this, and it's carried over to the U2. So basically what you can do is you can put this on your desk, and these little prongs towards the front here sit on the top of it and act as a wireless charging station as well as a receiver, which is really cool to see. It does have some nice rubber on the bottom, so it doesn't move around on your desk too much. Now, one really cool thing, so unlike a traditional receiver you see here, where this receiver broadcasts in all directions, this one specifically actually only broadcasts within a certain range. So instead of going all around, it only goes in kind of a cone like this. It's kind of the same logic as having a microphone be Corduroy or Omni, where it's going to be omnidirectional or it's going to be a specific zone, which is kind of cool to see. It'll be very interesting to see if this actually has any impact on the performance as compared to a regular dongle, but we'll talk about that more for the full review. Now on top of that, we do also have a standard receiver as well. So we do have just a standard 2.4 gigahertz USB-A receiver and a USB-A to C adapter here, which is nice to see. Again, most people are probably going to want to use this dock, but if you're traveling around and you need something else, it's nice to have this as an extra option. Now, one thing I will say though, what I'm a little disappointed to see, is that the bottom of this little USB-A to C adapter does not have any rubber on the bottom of it, so it just slides all over your desk, which is is rather unfortunate to see. It would have been nice to see some rubber on the bottom of this like it was on the bigger receiver, but again, seeing as how most people are going to use the bigger receiver, it's not that big of an issue. Now on top of that, we also have 2 extra boxes in the bottom of this box, if you can believe it. There's so much stuff packed in here, it's kind of crazy. Now inside these boxes are 2 USB-A to USB-C cables. Now, one of them is a very, very thick paracord cable, very similar to what we saw with the Vaxi mice. Again, very, very, very thick, very kind of rough texturing. And then there is also a standard plastic cable. Now, this is something I actually really, really like to see, and I really wish more companies would do this, because not all cables are going to work on everything. And again, while this is a wireless mouse, having options for different cables is nice to see. But that is everything for what's included in the box with the U2. Let's go ahead and talk about the U2 itself next. Now, as you would expect with a 60-gram mouse, and especially one from ZOWIE, this mouse is built like an absolute truck. There is no creaking, flexing. This mouse feels like an absolute tank, which is expected given their history, and a lot of their mice are on the heavier side, but they do share the same build quality you find on Vaxi mice, which is really nice to see. I'm sure the internals of this one is also very similar to Vaxi mice in terms of how they're constructed, if I had to guess, but I'll cover that more in the full teardown video. But overall, no QCU issues. Overall, the mouse feels very, very solid. Now, the shape of the U2, again, is definitely very different from what ZOWIE has done in the past. Now, again, this is designed to be a symmetrical mouse. It is technically an ambi mouse, but there's only buttons on the left side, so you can use this with your left hand, but you won't have access to side buttons. But it is definitely a right-handed optimized mouse. So it being a right-handed symmetrical mouse, the shape is definitely a little interesting as well. So you'll see that the peak of the shell is kind of a very wide peak, where it goes from the kind of center here all the way to the back, which is very, very odd. Now, the actual peak kind of feels like the X2H's peak, but it's not as wide. It's more taller and thinner. It still fills up the middle of my hand, because again, this is a claw grip optimized mouse, but it is definitely a very odd feeling. Again, my hands are really big. I have 7.5 by 5 inch hands, but this mouse still does feel rather comfortable in my hands, maybe a little on the small side, but nothing I haven't used before. So it is definitely a very comfortable shape for claw grip users. I'm not sure how it'll feel with other grip styles, but I'll talk about that more in the full review. Now, the coating on the U2 is very, very similar to the black coating we found on the Pulsar X2, V2, X2H, and X2A. Very, very similar. However, the coating, there's a lot more friction on the ZOWIE coating as opposed to the Pulsar coating. However, one downside of this is that it does hold on to moisture very well. So with my sweatier hands, you can see here that it kind of leaves this moisture effect all over it, which is unfortunate. So I'm very interested to see how the U2's coating holds up over time, because again, I have very sweaty hands. I'm interested to see if it can actually maintain its gripability over use, but I'll talk about that more in the full review. Now, in terms of all the buttons on the U2, with typical ZOWIE style, the clicks are very heavy. Now, previously ZOWIE has used Wano switches. I believe they're like 85, 75 gram force switches for their main clicks. I'm assuming that's going to be the same here, but I'll confirm that for the full review when I do my teardown. But the main clicks are very heavy. They do feel pretty consistent across the entire shell. The side buttons do have a very nice appeasing kind of click to them. They are a little on the louder side, but that's kind of to be expected. Now, they are not coated the same as the rest of the shell, which is really unfortunate, because these are just kind of a flat plastic. This is the same pitfall that the Vaxi MP1OS fell into, where the rest of the shell had a great coating and it felt great, but the side buttons were really slippery. Now, to ZOWIE's credit, these are flattened side buttons. So they're not going to be pill-like ones that we find on other mice. So these are going to be a lot easier to actuate, but they will most likely get kind of slippery over time, which is unfortunate to see. It would be nice to see them just have the same coating across the entire unit, as we saw on the main clicks, just have the same coating here, but pretty minimal issue. But the side clicks do feel pretty good. They feel pretty much one for one with the main clicks. Now, the scroll wheel is probably one of the most interesting parts of this mouse. Previously, with a lot of ZOWIE and Vaxi mice, we've seen them kind of have these meat grinder scroll wheels that have a very high actuation point. They're very loud, but the U2 scroll wheel is actually surprisingly silent. There is definitely a sound from the scroll point, but it's not nearly as loud and as meat grindery as it has been on previous models, which is nice to see. The only problem is that it's very, very light. It requires very, very little force to actually actuate a scroll point, so much so where I'd be concerned about potentially actuating the wheel by just dragging my finger across it. Like just right here, I can actuate the wheel by just catching it with the corner of my finger. I'll be interested to see if this causes any problems during use, because I have a feeling I'm going to accidentally switch weapons a little bit with this. It would have been nicer to maybe see this be a little tighter, but I'll have to see how it holds up over testing. Now, lastly, I wanted to talk about the skates. Now, these are 0.5 millimeter thickness, 100% PTFE skates. They are dyed black, of course. They are a bit of an odd design, because they do have this central cutout here for the wireless charging port, but they are very large surface area skates, and just because they're not the same surface area, there's going to be some inconsistencies as well. I'll most likely end up removing these to install something like the X-ray pad donut skates or dots, or just something else just that has more consistent surface area. But I'll see how the skates perform during testing. I'll see how they hold up and see if they cause any issues over use. Alrighty, well, that's pretty much it for my first kind of hands-on impressions of the ZOWIE U2. I'm going to go ahead and set this up, plug this into my computer, do a couple runs of Kovacs, and I'll be right back for some final first impressions. Alright, now in terms of just kind of like first impressions impressions of the U2, it definitely is a very interesting shape. It's definitely feeling a little tiny bit too small for my hands, but I've been using a lot of very unique grips lately, so that may just be my hands being a little strained more than usual. I'm sure I'll get used to it over time, but the shape is definitely something I'm gonna have to take some time to get used to. But the mouse itself does perform quite well. The skates are a lot faster than I thought they were going to be. Again, I was using this on the LG Neptune, so that could be part of it, but I was playing at 60 cm and 50 cm respectively, and both of them felt a lot faster, which is quite surprising for larger surface area skates. Not normally something I find with those. I usually find those to be a lot slower, so that's quite odd there. Again, faster skates, which makes sense to compensate for the heavier weight of the U2, but we'll see how it performs on other pads. I'll do some testing on that for the full review. Now, one of the most interesting things I did notice is that when I went to set up the U2, the USB-A 2.4 GHz dongle and the dock did not work unless I plugged them in with the specific cable that came with my U2, which is something very, very odd I have not seen before. I tested the Pulsar cable for my X2 V2 for the USB-A to C adapter, and it just didn't work. And I tried one with my Keychron, and that didn't work either. I tried the YZL one, that one also didn't work. It only worked with the cable that came with the U2, which is really odd. I'm not sure why they've done that. My assumption is it's something with the power efficiency or something with the cable itself. There may be something unique about the cable that I'm not seeing on a surface level. I just thought that was kind of odd. So the cabling is a little odd. I'll do some digging and see if I can figure out why it only works with specific cables. I'll try and figure that out for the full review. But aside from the oddities, setting up the mouse and getting the initial performance done on it was very solid. Overall, it's a very solid feeling mouse. No real complaints so far. Definitely very interested to see how it holds out over time. I'm very interested to see how this mouse feels with different skates, of course, as well, because these bigger surface area skates are a little weird, but I'll cover all that in the full review. Alrighty, well, that is pretty much it for my first impressions of the ZOWIE U2. Definitely a very unique mouse, definitely very different from what I expected from a ZOWIE mouse. I'll be honest with you, it actually feels very similar to the Vaxi MP1OS, but obviously because it's not a symmetrical ergo hybrid, it's just a pure symmetrical shape. It just kind of has the same vibe to it, if that makes sense, which I know sounds really weird to say from like an analytical reviewer point of view, but it does feel kind of similar. But I'm very interested to see how this mouse holds up over time. I will say I definitely prefer the shape of the U2 over the MP01S, so we're already on a good start there, but I'm very interested to see how this mouse holds out over testing, how it performs, even see if I can figure out why it only works with specific cables, but I'll talk about that more in the full review. As always, I'll have a full, much more in-depth review of the ZOWIE U2 coming out in a couple weeks after this video, as well as a teardown guide coming out shortly after that. If you want to see my full review and the teardown of me taking this mouse apart and hopefully not breaking it, be sure to get subscribed so you don't miss that. Thank you very much again to ZOWIE for sending this out for me to take a look at. I greatly appreciate it. And if you'd like to support the channel and support everything I'm doing here, you can become a channel member. Channel members have their names shouted out at the end of videos in the credits, so if you want to see your name at the end of my videos, you can become a channel member and support everything happening here on the channel. But thank you very much for watching. I greatly appreciate it, and I'll catch you guys in the full review of the U2 coming up in a couple weeks. Peace.